Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. My name is Sanjay Veli, and welcome to the Windows 10 webinar series. And today we will be focusing on Windows 10 security. I'm from a company called Astiostech. I'm going to move to that slide. I'm just going to introduce you to our topic for today. I'm a technical director and a company that focuses on open source technologies and security solutions. We've been actively involved in exploring the open source solutions in Windows Azure and Microsoft Azure. And we've been putting a lot of open source solutions as well in the cloud, and it's been quite an exciting journey for us. So this morning, we're gonna talk about Windows 10 security overview. And please permit me to sit for the rest of the remaining of the presentation. So, firstly, thank you very much again for joining this webinar. Appreciate that. We do have the question and answers stream going on live. I guess you have to register in order to post a question. All right, so let's just get straight to the presentation. So we'll be talking about the kind of security solutions that are now introduced in Windows 10. So let's talk about what we already have today. For people like me, for example, being in the security business, security consultation, and also operating system guidelines and best practices, we've seen a lot of companies substantially invest in security solutions, and they always believe that those solutions could possibly prevent future attacks. And many times what we've seen is that it could be proven wrong, and it has been proven wrong as well. That's simply because the security landscape itself has really changed. What we mean by that is that the reason why someone does something has also changed. The type of attacks that people have has also changed. Not necessarily the attacks get more sophisticated. Sometimes the attacks vary in different types of vectors or different type of targets. So it's a never-ending battle, if I may say so, to keep up to date with the latest trend of security threats out there. So how, as an end user, did you ensure yourself that you always are able to protect yourself, family, organization from the potential threat that will be coming in the next 3 months or 6 months? Well, the answer obviously is we rely on probably, I could say, old school method of detection and prevention. The question is, how long are we going to continue doing that? Will that be something that we will practice in the next 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? It's, to me, as a person who's involved in this industry, it does get tiring to a point where we ask, what's next? So, skipping this slide. So let's just look at the evolution of attacks. These are stuff that we've been seeing in the past 10 years. So the first kind of real serious attack that we've seen that spread across a big collection of computers was the famous Blaster and Slammer. So the Blaster and Slammer virus or scripts were literally just to cause a lot of trouble. They caused a lot of trouble. They caused people a lot of downtime and loss of productivity. But they never really did do anything else but that. You know, they just, whoever who created Blaster, whoever who created Slammer became famous. And they were trying to find him, and they actually found him and or her. And so it was more of a popularity contest, you know, like I created the best, most rapidly expanding, rapidly growing virus, for example. But that was more of mischief, and there was no real malice to it besides that. But then we start to see something interesting, that in fact this slide should also be amended actually. Instead, we are seeing that the trend of attacks are changing, and that attackers are actually going to get profitable by doing what they do. So now it becomes a motivation for those attackers to continue doing what they do. And one particular name or attack that you probably will be very familiar is ransomware. And you've probably seen in news streams or websites that recent attacks on ransom-based attacks where it infects a particular computer and tells you that if you do not pay X amount of money, you will not be able to retrieve those important documents that you have in your desktop, for example. And people pay. It's a huge industry. If you read the papers, it's a multi-million-dollar industry. People are profiting out of this. And most of the transactions happen in the form of Bitcoin or untraceable way of, like MoneyGram, for example, untraceable way of transmitting money over. But we also saw something very interesting in the past few years, and that is attacks that have been initiated at national levels. That means countries waging attacks not on another country alone, but on organizations, on individuals. So we are seeing the attacks vary from different types of purposes, if I may say so. So the purpose has changed. The motivation has changed. The reason for people to do what they do has changed. So how do we keep, here's an example of the Sony breach, if you remember the movie that got everyone was talking about. It was a comedy. And Sony got hacked and people were exposed, people were exposed, the customers were exposed. We do not know really what else was exposed, but that really made, and this was not just a hacker, this was a whole country going against an organization. It's quite extraordinary. And the threat they make to people who go and watch this particular movie is like amazing. They threat on things like 9/11. So you start to see that the seriousness of these attacks are getting really much more worrying. So what do we have to do to actually? We can't be always chasing after the attacks. What do we have to do next? That's always been the question of security professionals. What can we do to ensure that we completely make it absolutely difficult for the next attack to happen? I wouldn't dare say the word impossible, but we make it extremely, extremely difficult. And one way is to actually ruin the economic model of the attacker. What does that mean? It means you actually make it very expensive for the attacker to make such an attack. So if you imagine there are multiple types of hackers, you have the people who run scripts and are just malicious and just want to do stuff. And then you have the middle group that are quite skillful, yet still fall within the not so serious attackers. But then you have the top layer, which is the professionals, the ones that do it as a job, for example. So if you, excuse me, if you ruin the economic model of attackers, you probably remove the first and second layer. You probably remove the noisy bunch. Okay? So how are we going to address that in Windows 10? How are we going to approach this in Windows 10? Now, this is quite interesting. When I first saw Windows 10, some of the webinars that I have watched, that was last year, I was under the impression it's going to be just and more solutions on top of Windows operating system. But I was actually quite surprised to see that the thinking has changed, and that is something quite exciting. What do I mean the thinking has changed is that if you imagine there was an initiative called Trusted Computing initiative from Microsoft, and that was basically, it's all about protection. It's all about creating more protection on top of the operating system. So we are always trying to find what people are doing and then create a protection around it. So what I saw in Windows 10 was actually quite interesting, and that is a redesign of how security is supposed to, or how security can be today. A redesign means we take away the external factors and we look at the code, the operating system itself. How and what people do to attack the operating system, and we try to stop that. That's the impression that I get when I saw the slide. So I got excited because I said, okay, now we are seeing a shift, a dramatic shift in thinking. Now we're seeing something significant. So today I'm going to show you some demos. I'm going to show you some concepts and some theory on those particular subjects. I'm not going to cover all of them. Obviously, there's a lot to cover. I'm going to touch and go on some, but I'm going to focus a little bit more on some. Okay. So we've heard about this hardware-based security a lot these days with UEFI and Trusted Platform Module. What Microsoft is trying to do is trying to put a lot more responsibility to this hardware-based security, because stuff like Trusted Platform Module is almost impossible to break these days. Trusted Platform Module is a chip that sits inside your computer that acts like a key store that stores your cryptography information. So rather than the cryptography information is stored in things like thumb drives or a software storage, it's actually stored on a firmware. So Windows tries to make use of that, tries to make use of TPM. If you look at the screen now, you see there are 4 layers of security introduced through hardware. Let's talk about the first layer, UEFI. UEFI basically says that if I don't trust the bootloader of the operating system that is currently being booted, I'm going to consider that as a compromise. So what does that mean? It means that if it is a Windows 10 image, or it is a Windows whatever, next version, it has to meet a certain signature, or it has to be an approved signature that will then allow UEFI to say that, okay, this is a trusted bootloader image, and let's proceed to boot. As opposed to the previous way of booting, if you remember back in the day, we had something called BIOS, basic input-output. And what does that do? It actually just tells the computer, okay, get ready to load the operating system. There is no check mechanism to say, is that operating system really integral? Is that operating system really what it's supposed to be? Is it not compromised? It's no way to say that. With UEFI, we start to take the BIOS closer to the operating system, in fact, closer to the boot part of the operating system, and start to ask, is that boot valid? Is that boot a proper boot image that is signed and verified? And then, as I've mentioned earlier, the Trusted Platform Module, that is our storage for our cryptography. And then biometrics on sensors, biometric sensors built into hardware like the one you're seeing in your, well, you probably can't see it that much. It's a small screen on the side, I know. But if you see this laptop, this Surface Pro, it has biometrics built in. Biometrics come in the form of fingerprints readers, iris scanners, or even in this particular demo that I'm going to do today is facial recognition. Now, virtualization-based security, I'll touch on that a bit later. It's a very, very interesting concept that I think it's groundbreaking, if I may say so, because the thought process that went into it, in my opinion, it's very mature, it's very smart, what Microsoft is trying to do with VBS. Okay, let's look at, oh, here we go, VBS. What is traditionally happening today in an operating system, in a hardware, your laptop? When you boot, the operating system boots, and then everything is one big open field. I mean, you've got kernel in there, you've got drivers in there, you've got the operating system in there. So everyone is sitting in one big happy field. And that could be a problem if you imagine that you've seen attacks that attack kernel level drivers. You can see attacks that attack boot level drivers. You've seen attacks that attack system level drivers. You've seen attacks that attack applications, apps on the desktop. So everything is this one big mush that happens in the operating system. There is no segregation. Virtualization-based security introduced something quite interesting. It introduces Hyper-V into the whole equation. So what does that mean? Okay, let's take a scenario of a hospital. Let's say we have a hospital and there is a particular division that says this is isolation department 1, isolation department 2, and isolation department 3. Now whatever happens in these isolations, they don't cross over. People should not cross over, or even if they cross over, they need to be cleaned, they need to be disinfected to go to the next isolation. So the same way, if you imagine now, the operating system is isolating certain functions. So if you start to take the next level of thought and say, how does this help? How does this help? So Hyper-V creates a layer right after the CPU, and then says the operating system is one Hyper-V that is running, and VBS is another. So what happens then? If there is a compromise that happens on the operating system, it is virtually impossible for that particular code or attacker to actually go into the other side, as you can see on the screen, the VBS side. Why? Because the VBS side and the side that is on the other side where the user cannot interact directly are only accessible through certain apps, certain access methods or certain drivers. They cannot be accessed by just about anyone. Now, if you think about that concept, is complete isolation. It's like having your laptop split into two. This laptop does something which is like security checks, and this laptop is for you to run your software. So if you imagine now a scenario, if I do a login, the login happens on this side, but whatever I do, I run Microsoft Office, happens on this laptop. So they're totally different laptops. So whatever compromise that happens on this laptop stays in this laptop. It does not go there. So if you imagine the same scenario now with virtualization-based security, it's the same concept. Okay? Now, let's go to the next one, shared secret. Now, shared secret is for me personally, I've got so many passwords on so many sites, from Facebook to Twitter to LinkedIn, and I think we all fall under the same category. I see myself more and more forgetting the passwords because I have the habit of creating quite complex passwords, and I believe everyone does as well. And the problem is I think of a password for a particular service, and then I forget it, and each time find myself trying to reset. So what actually happens with so-called passwords, or shared secrets in this case, is that we tend to use either third-party software to manage all our passwords, or we just write it down somewhere, or we even use one password to access all services, one single password. But then again, because it's a password, I could actually tell someone that password. I could say, hey, this is my password, and that person could tell somebody else, so you imagine the damage that can happen then. So in Microsoft, they introduced something called Passport. Now, what is actually Passport? It's two-factor. Now, I'm sure you've heard of multi-form factor authentication. So multi-form factor authentication is made up of three components: something you know, something you have, and something that is you. So something you know are things like your shared secret. Something you have is like a biometric, a certificate key or something like that, and something that is you, that is your physical body, that's your biometrics. So the concept is that if I authenticate more than once, more than one different method, it is far more secure. But we've seen that a lot of organizations try to implement this, but substantially fail because Either they are too expensive or too difficult to implement. Now, Passport does something very simple and it's really cool. If you look at this laptop that is in front of me, this is something that I have. And if I have a password or a PIN code, it's something that I know. Do you see where I'm getting at? It means that we could actually use this laptop to only authorize access to that PIN code. That means you're actually combining something that you have, which is your laptop, and something that is something you know, that is your PIN. So Microsoft Passport introduces two form factor in the simplest form possible. Your laptop is something you have, your password is something you know. Boom, you solve the two form factor in the simplest possible manner. Now, Passport is also within the FIDO Alliance. If you need to find out more, please do a search on the internet for it. FIDO Alliance is also jointly collaborative with Google. So what it does, your Windows Passport authentication or your Windows Passport credentials that you have signed in can be used to open up multiple other sites. Okay, so Windows Hello, really cool animation there, is the biometrics authentication that is present in Windows 10. So biometrics, as you know, could represent in the form of thumbprint, iris scanner, or facial recognition, or even much more technologies that will come in the future. Windows Hello can also be used in conjunction with a PIN, for example, in case you forget. So if you're wondering what's the fallback method, you actually need to use a PIN. So what does Windows Hello do? It actually do two form factor authentication. Something that you are, remember we were talking about something that you know, something that you have, or something that you are. So Windows Hello is about something that is about you, something that you are, biometrics. So the FIDO Alliance, you can see the list of people who are, and of course this is going to continue to grow. So imagine your Windows Passport can actually sign you on to your Google. Your Windows Passport can sign you on to PayPal, for example, and so on and so forth, as you can see there. Okay, the next thing is to protect. The problem with authentication, as we all know, the password, there is a big flaw or a big problem that we saw in the past, especially with Windows 7, was a particular attack called pass the hash. Pass the hash, cute name. So pass the hash basically means, okay, to make it very simple, what does pass the hash attack, what does pass the hash attack potentially can do is that, for instance, if I sign in my username and password on Windows right now, you are then authenticated and given something called an access token, a token, okay? If you're authenticated, here's your token. Pass the hash basically means if an attacker gets into your computer, they can dump the token, store the token into their own file, for example, and use that token to propagate into the network. Now this sounds like something super difficult to do, but really it's actually quite simple. If you have some time later, go and look for this software called Mimikatz. Let me give you a scenario how this attack can be extremely dangerous. If I have that pass the hash attack, if I have infected a computer, for example, and that computer belongs to a very low privilege user in the network, all and well. So what I do is I go and dump the password. Now, these are actual malwares that exist today, by the way, that do what I'm about to explain. We all are guilty that we make our corporate laptop image or desktop images based on one particular image. What does that mean? It means that there's a potential that you will also create the same username and password across all the devices that you just created. Yes, it may be a local account, super secure, it's got 20 characters long string of password, but they are the same across 5,000 devices in the network. So what happens now is, let's say Sarah's computer gets infected. Sarah is a very low privilege user. By using Mimikatz, I can actually dump the credential into my own application, and I can replay that credential and see if I can access the next guy's computer. Now question is, can I access? Because the local admin password for that particular user, like we were talking about earlier, is the same across 5,000 computers. So I can actually use that same login information and go to the next guy. Now, if I go to the next guy, I can now dump his hash or his access token into my program again. So now if I want to go to the third computer, I'm going to try first hash, second hash, and so on and so forth, until you reach to, let's say, John's computer. Now, John is a domain admin, but his laptop or computer has the same password as the first attack. So what's happening now? That first laptop is now going to attack John using local username and password, as we have dumped and used Mimikatz to replay. And now Mimikatz is in John's computer. When it dumps, it's also going to dump domain admin access tokens. And now you see the problem where that can actually lead us. Now it's gone completely viral, literally. So Credential Guard uses the technology that I explained earlier, the virtualization, to prevent something like this from happening. Right? So where does Device Guard and, forget about Device Guard, where does Credential Guard sit? Like I was saying, the operating system on that side and the Credential Guard completely isolated. So you can't literally dump any more hashes. You can't see the SSH keys. You can't see anything anymore. It all comes out as information that is not usable. So pass the hash attack was actually a very famous way of propagating malware, and could also be a famous way today still, if it is not addressed properly. Okay, the next one, data leakage, data protection and data leakage. Some of the information in the slide may look a little bit off, but whatever. Data leakage, very simple problem actually, very simple problem, and that is, oh, so sorry, I think I might have opened the wrong presentation. Actually supposed to have a demo here. Okay, so I'm just going to break for a while. Before I go to the next, I want to show you Windows Hello. I think I've actually copied some older slides, but it's okay, that's fine. Just a small part where I actually add the demos. So I'm going to show you how Windows Hello, how we're going to take advantage of something called Windows Hello. Now, what I have in front of me is a Surface Pro 4, and it's got this Intel camera, and this Intel camera is actually a 3D camera that has infrared as well. So I'm going to actually, now if I log on to my laptop, I have to key in a password. So I'm going to actually register or enroll myself for Hello. So what is going to happen is it's actually going to read three-dimensional information around my face, my features, and of course the infrared can actually also show me hotspots in my face and whatnot. And it's not just about a two-dimensional image of this face of mine. It's more than that. It's actually a three-dimensional image. You have to have contour, you have to have the third axis and whatnot. Okay, so I'm going to show you, it sounds very complicated, right? It sounds like, oh my God, all of these things are going to happen, and how am I going to enroll? Is it going to be a complex process? I assure you it's not going to be more than 20 seconds. So let's just show you that. I'm going to show you Hello. How does the enrollment work? So the first thing you need to do on a new computer is to set up the PIN. Okay, it's not going to be 20 seconds because I'm explaining to you, obviously. So the first thing you do is you add a PIN. And now it's actually going to go to Microsoft. Oh, sorry. That's not the user I want. So I'm using the wrong account. That's great. Oh no, it is the correct account. So I'm going to try that again. I'm going to have to use Asmin, do you know the password for the KLCC demo?
Microsoft 1234.
You should.
Capital M.
Online. On Outlook.com? No? Okay, I forgot that password. All right, I'm gonna just, right, I have no idea how to do that. So I've got to log on to another account, which I am familiar of. Let's try this. I hope you're still seeing the screen. Are you able to still see the screen? Are they able to see the screen? Yeah, okay. So a slight inconvenience. And let's try to do this. Oops. Slow. So my apology, it's taking a bit longer than I expected. So basically, I'm just going to proceed while this thing is getting signed on. I'm going to proceed to explain to you the next thing that, that we are actually going to talk about, and that is protection beyond just malware prevention, malware detection. So what do I mean by that? If you have a malware in your computer, you will actually rely on your antivirus to protect you against that malware. And that's because the antivirus has a signature that recognizes that particular malware. So it's going to stop it at its tracks. But what if you have a malware that is not detectable by the signature? So again, as I was telling you from the beginning of the presentation, it's about chasing after malware. You know, it's like we have to keep updating ourselves against attacks. We have to keep updating ourselves against this malware, and it's never going to end. So we, from a security point of view, it looks like we are on the losing end. We are on the end that is going to be keep chasing after such a thing. So the question is, where do we draw the line? Where do we say, okay, now we really need to re-look at how we're going to protect every single desktop. But if we are going to rely on signature-based antivirus alone, that's going to be a never-ending game, or we're going to actually be even in the losing end. Okay, so I've got this running. Let me try this again. Oh, sorry, I didn't probably log on. Two. All right. Let's see. All right, it's trying to build a search first. Hang on a second. Let me see if I can do it alternatively. All right. Hello. Oh, search result. Okay. It's going to be back in a few minutes. So it's building the search index. That's fine. Oh, I can actually do it this way. Why do I have to do it this way? Yeah. All right. I don't need the search. All right. So let's create a pin. And now I'm going to demonstrate how the Windows Hello works. So I'm actually going to key in the password. In order for me to create a PIN, I need to first authenticate based on my original authentication, which is my password, which is something that we should all try to avoid. I'm going to key in a PIN. So if you see this PIN, it's actually the same PIN I use for my bank account. No, I'm just kidding. So now that I've created a PIN, I can actually enroll myself to Windows Hello. Let's check it out. Let's check how it works. Okay, so like I was telling you, it takes quite fast. You saw the PIN enrollment was fast. Now let's do the face recognition. Okay, all you have to do is click on Get Started, and it asks for the PIN, obviously. It needs to make sure that you are who you are before you could enroll, not that somebody else. Here we go. All I have to do is just look at the screen. That's it. that's it. You've done Windows Hello recognition. So I could also do without my glasses. I would say, oh, you should recognize me without my glasses. Or if I have a cap on all the time, I can say recognize me with the cap on. So how efficient this is, let's take a look. I'm gonna lock the screen. I hope you're seeing this online. So I'm gonna lock the screen. It's gonna be so fast that, and boom, I'm logged in. Did you see that? It's so fast. But what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to hide the camera. I'm using my thumb now to hide the camera so that it will not detect me. So do you see that word is looking for me? It can't look for me. My thumb is on the camera. But now I'm going to remove my thumb. Hello, Sanjay. And I'm logged in. So that is how fast for you to set up something called two-form factor authentication. So now please allow me to log on to my other account, which our demo was all, which is where our slides are. And here we go. I'm going to pull out the slides. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is data leakage. While it might sound like a trivial problem that, oh, it happens, and what do we do? When I had a chance to talk to some banks here in Malaysia, the biggest response to why data on the go, which means data on the go is something like that, thumb drives and USB sticks and stuff, and external drives, is that the process in which it takes to provision it, to manage it, is too cumbersome. Now, if you imagine an entire organization of 5,000 people and they transact very private and confidential documents, it will be quite scary to know that every one of those hard drives that you give your consultants are not protected by any form of encryption. And I had personally experienced that. I had some confidential information on my thumb drive, and I was actually with a client, and we were doing an audit, and I've got all the results of the audit, and some of the results of the audit includes passwords. I lost the thumb drive because someone stole my bag from the car. And when I told that to the client, they were like, they were freaking out. They were like, oh my God, that means our entire audit information is gone. I didn't even broke a sweat. Why? Because I protected all my assets, all my disk with enterprise, military grade or higher encryption. And I think coming back to why people don't do it is, if you take the scenario of 5,000 employees, to manage one person's key, let's say you encrypt one of the guys' disk, and if for any reason the password is missing, it is virtually impossible for you to retrieve that data. So that means just one person, and how often do we have that we forget passwords? And we were talking about that earlier also, that we start to write it down, and if we forget, that means boom, the entire 5,000 encrypted hard disks are potential administrative and data loss in itself. So you don't really need to lose the hard disk, you just need to lose the password, and you literally lose the hard disk. So it can be an administrative nightmare. So Windows actually, since Windows 7 actually, BitLocker has been used, and BitLocker has been dramatically improved as well, from 7 to 8, 8.1, and now Windows 10. One of the biggest improvement we have in Windows 10 for BitLocker is the fact that you can actually do single sign-on. So remember Microsoft Passport? Once you're authenticated to the operating system, it will not ask you for a PIN anymore if you have a BitLocker-driven external drive. Now, it is quite simple. Sorry, just going to skip that one again. I'm going to go back to that one again. If you have a drive like that and it's on the go, it means that you want to also enforce a policy. Today, you may say that all companies' hard drives are required to to be encrypted. So you could use BitLocker and do it from the organization, from the IT administrator point of view. But what if I bring one of these into the organization? Yes, you can block USB drives, and that again poses the next big problem, because then you don't allow USB drives. But if you do allow, it means now data could leave the organization. Now, from a data movement point of view, there's two things to talk about. One, whether you allow it or not. And two, if you don't mine it, when data leaves the organization, is it going to be protected? Is it going to be secure? So now you can actually define policy on it. You can actually say, if I detect a USB stick that is not part of the company, obviously because you're saying that the entire company resources are BitLocker protected, but this particular one is not, you can then add a policy to say, if I don't see BitLocker, I'm going to actually have to ask you to encrypt before you could use it in the organization. That sounds so cool. Okay, some of the slides talk about BitLocker, enterprise data protection, and rights management. So my scope today is more towards BitLocker. Right? BitLocker provides data protection when it's out of the organization. However, this drive, when you lose it, nobody can see the files in there. That's all fine and well. However, when you take the file out of this drive and place it on a desktop, you lose the encryption. So that's where things like data separation, where you actually, or enterprise data protection and rights management will then be of value to you. Because then, not that you protect just the drive, you also protect individual files. And on top of protecting individual files, you protect the policy that that file can actually carry. And that policy could mean that file can only be opened by 2 people and no one else after they sign into their Microsoft Passport. Okay, a very short introduction of that. So, just to go through quickly, BitLocker, some of the features of BitLocker: protects data when it's lost or stolen. Again, this is disk level encryption. When the file leaves that, it is no longer going to be protected. So just to bear that in mind. But compared to another scenario where you actually have a thumb drive and it's not even protected, that's even worse, because somebody picks it up, there goes your data. Now, if you think about it, since this thumb drive is encrypted and can only be opened with a passport authentication or a PIN number, you can imagine if I take this thumb drive and stick it into any computer that has a ton of virus, it is not going to get infected, because that even the malware cannot access this. So you're not only protecting it against loss, you're also protecting it against attack on that external drive. All right, I'm going to skip enterprise data protection and Azure rights management. So before we go into that, I'm going to show you a quick demonstration on BitLocker. So I actually have this thumb drive. I'm going to stick it into my, or was it this one? Okay, it's this one. So this one has no encryption on it. So if I put it into my USB, it's going to pop up and say, okay, here's all our files, blah, blah, blah. What are you going to do with it? But if you want to enforce it with a policy, you can actually do it. I can show you where the policy is. So the policy is right here. And that's BitLocker. I hope you can see. And Aswin here told me a trick that we could actually do that, to zoom. Thanks, Aswin, for that. Appreciate it. So if you look at the fixed data drives, operating system drives, or removable data drives. So now this particular thumb drive falls under the category of removable data drives. And if you see the policy, it says enforced drive encryption type on removable drive. So I can actually set that policy. I can say enable that, and I can say it has to be a full encryption, and I could actually save that. Oops. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to enable it to full encryption. So what's going to happen now? I also can do something else. I can say deny access on drives that are not protected by BitLocker. So you've got two-prong approach. First, you say that anything that is not protected, protect. But if it is not protected, I'm also going to deny. Okay? So deny write access. What does that mean? It means you cannot copy files into the drive, obviously, right? I'm going to say OK to that. So the policy is configured, so if it is already applied, technically if I plug in this unencrypted thumb drive, it should say something. Oh, here we go. Did you notice that? It popped up and say, this drive is unencrypted, you need to encrypt to actually start using it. Okay? Now, we also set the policy to disable write access, so let's see if we could actually write this. Where's my computer? I'm going to try to write a text file. Do you notice that the right click does not even show up new? So if I'm going to copy that file over, try again, it's not even going to allow me. So that's BitLocker at the policy level, which then makes it so easy if you deploy Active Directory to set this standard across all computers in your organization. Okay. Now comes the, in my personal view, something that I really like. I'd like to talk about and also share this, and that is the next generation of application level controls. So, what is this device guard? The next generation of application level control is about, let me just put the screen, put on full screen here. Okay, so the way we manage applications today, there are two ways to do it, right? What if we trust applications based on signatures that we say these are trusted apps? If I got 10 apps in the desktop, I say if I trust these 10 apps, therefore these 10 apps can run. The 11th app that come in, stop it from running. Or that's the old method of I don't care what app you run, as long as there is a malware in there, my powerful antivirus is going to say, block that. But if you think about it, the fundamental methodology of both, it makes a lot of sense that we have done what we have done, which is detection-based, and we have been doing it, and it's a uphill struggle. But at the same time now, we have an opportunity to do something else. Now, what is this trusted by default until defined as a threat? Very interesting. I'm sure you're a smartphone user. If you're a smartphone user, it's not even a question these days. When you use smartphones, that could be your Windows phone, it could be an Apple device, an iPhone, or it could be an Android device. You have something called an App Store. Now, the App Store, a huge learning that we have from App Store. What is that learning? And that is apps need to first exist in the App Store before users can install them. But of course, we have something called side loading. And side loading means I don't go through the App Store. I can actually run it by, let's say Android allows you to do that. And other platforms may allow you if you root the phone, for example, in iOS case. But one big learning we get from this so-called store concept is that every app will then need to have a level of trust from the store itself. The store needs to then say that this app is now a trusted app in the store. So what we learn from this is that the ecosystem of building apps, the ecosystem of distributing apps is managed by a store which also protects what is actually being downloaded and used by the user. Now, it is not always the case where you have apps that are always good that end up in stores. You also see stories that bad apps end up in store and in fact or cause trouble to people's phones. But more than seeing that, you see the other picture, you see the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that the majority of the apps are going to be clean, are going to be safe, because they have to go through the store's policy. So if we take the same concept now, apply it to Windows, what do we get? We've got an entire ecosystem just like the mobile platform. Okay? So that's basically what Device Guard is all about. So I actually explained that. So Device Guard is something that really excited me a lot, because it really talked about an end-to-end protection. We're not just talking about protecting a file. We're not just talking about protecting an executable or a file name or a file hash. We're actually talking about from the point of UEFI that we talked about earlier, right up to the point where the file is executed in the user mode is within the Device Guard ecosystem. Okay, what does that mean? It means that because you do this virtualization thing, because you create this virtualization inside the operating system, you virtualize the Device Guard. You saw that slide earlier that it showed the credential guard, and it also showed the Device Guard. So I'm just going to flash that slide very quickly to show you what I actually mean. This one here, I'm not going to increase the size, but if you notice, that's the Device Guard. So it's also running in its own separate virtual space. So what does that mean? It means it's actually protected against attack against itself. So Device Guard itself is protected against any potential compromise in the software itself. Okay? So if we look at Device Guard now, like here, sorry, let me just up the screen here. Right? It is designed to help, it's signed policies to help prevent users and malware with elevated privileges from changing IT's app control policy. Now, I'm going to show you a demo shortly. I'm going to show you a demo on how a Windows machine can be easily compromised and the firewall will be bypassed. The anti-malware, in this case Windows Defender, is not going to know what's going on. It's going to just allow you. So where does this app sit? Does it sit in malware category? Because if antivirus says it's not malware, is that 100% true? The answer is obviously no, because it could be that that particular file or software was written maliciously just for that organization. And speaking of that, I just want to take one step back. I remember in the beginning of our slide, we saw the evolution of attacks. We had the slammer, then we had the ransomware, and we had the government brazen attacks and whatnot. It's actually going back to ransomware, interestingly enough. We no longer see attacks on government to government. Well, at least I don't know of it, or it's not as rampant as ransomware is. There is another problem. And one of the things that I do, I also do socket level programming. That means I actually open sockets, TCP and UDP and all the stuff, and create client-server applications. Why? Because I have my reasons to communicate certain apps and certain functionality. But if you are a programmer, you will be very familiar with this socket-based programming. So what does socket-based programming do? It actually creates a client-server scenario. Okay, it has a client that can connect to the server. Now, if you are also familiar with JS and Node.js, Node.js is also an example of creating a socket-based server on a desktop. Now, if you imagine that every programmer starts creating all of these sockets on every part of the desktop and laptop and computers, every single place is going to be full of open ports. So the next possible attack, since that we start to use sockets a lot, could be that every single PC is exposing themselves to a certain port. And if that application is not written properly, or there's no proper security guidelines, authentication, authorization, and encryption and whatnot, then every single machine is actually acting as a vulnerable server. Okay, so those people who create all those socket apps, please be careful. Please create your apps with a lot of security in mind and making sure that it's limited to to that organization, and it's not going to give access to anyone from outside. Now, back to device guard. So device guard is just that, you know. Now let's just take the same example as Node.js or socket programming. I'm actually going to show you a demo where I actually created a socket software. I'm going to actually run that software. I'm actually going to create a scenario to show you how device guard can actually protect against such an attack. So let's go back to the scenario. So device guard again. If you can see your screen, right. So I'm going to paint a scenario. So this is a Windows 10 Enterprise Edition. So device guard works only on the Enterprise Edition, by the way. And I am going to create a scenario very quickly. And I'm going to say this PC belongs to a person named Sarah. So Sarah wants a movie player, if I may say so. So I actually really wanted to infect Sarah's PC, and this is my opportunity. So I actually go to Sarah, I say, hey Sarah, I've got this player called VLC. Again, there's nothing against VLC here, but this is an exploit I'm going to show you using VLC as a mask, if I may say so. So if I've got VLC running, I said, hey Sarah, by the way, I've got this VLC player. It literally can watch any kind of file extensions or types of codec out there that can watch a lot of, that's not available sometimes in the core operating system. And she goes like, oh, great. Can you install it for me? No problem. It'll just take 2 seconds. So when I'm on the computer now, I've put this software here. I just right-click, but I need to run it as administrator once. I'll explain to you what the software does. So it's saying allow access. So what's happening is, while I'm executing this software, actually I'm going to just say yes. I'm going to say yes. This is all done once, by the way. Oh, it's saying starting VLC player for Windows. Great. It actually launched VLC player. But in actual fact, because I'm a bad guy, I actually embedded the reason why I showed the pop-up to show that it's not native VLC that's running. It's actually my software that calls VLC. Now, what's actually happening is that it actually created a socket. It created a socket in Windows. Now, Sarah finished watching. I said, Sarah, okay, I've finished installing, so I'm not finished watching. I showed her a demo. I close it. If you notice, it is actually, the VLC software is actually closed. But in the background, however, if I look for, I actually call the software test. Test2, I don't know why programmers don't name files properly, but test2 is actually the file that is actually being executed alongside with VLC. Now what I can actually do on a remote computer like this, I can actually, if everything works well, remotely access Sarah's computer. This is my remote desktop. I can say open. Did you notice what's happening at the back? I actually created a Trojan, or if I may say so, a Trojan or a socket programming that actually opens files. Did you notice that? I actually have the capability to open Sarah's computer. Now, I need to close this. Okay. Now, I'm going to prove to you that it is the Trojan, I'm actually going to shut down the executable that I showed you, the test2. Okay, the test2 is actually forked out of, oh boy, let me just end this. Now if I run it again from my computer, it is probably not going to work. Say it does not work. At the background, I can't close this. Okay, I closed this. All right, so I'm going to try that again to show you that it is running. It's actually running. It's gonna time out. So it's actually not running the code that you're seeing here. All right, you see the code that it's going to say, our connection attempt failed. But now Sarah runs the software again. She does not need administrative right anymore. She runs it like a normal app will run. Oh, okay, I've got my VLC running. But because I've already established this, to open up ports on the firewall and whatnot, I'm actually having direct connection to Sarah's computer. So if I run an executable, you can see it opened up Internet Explorer. And I could even open up a software, for example, Notepad EXE. You notice that at the background, Notepad EXE is launched. Let me show you that again. Let me close Internet Explorer. So I can actually close VLC. I don't need it to be running. It just called to just show you that I could actually embed it into another program. Launch Notepad again. You see Notepad opens. And let's say I want to open MS Paint. And MS Paint opens. So the thing is now we have a scenario where the app that I gave Sarah, it's not a virus. Windows Defender is running. I can show you that. I can show you that Windows Defender is running. It's up to date. I can also show you the firewall is running. I know I'm running out of time a bit, so just bear with me. The firewall is running. It's fully protecting the operating system. It's a bit slow. If you notice, firewall is on. I'm just going to zoom that for you. And there's no zoom in this software, sorry. But the firewall is on. It's all on. I'm going to show you this way then. It's on, it's on, it's on. But that software does as good as a malware. All right, so how does Device Locker help is that it can actually say, so what I've done here in this particular laptop, I've actually set up Device Locker, and I've set it up to audit mode only. So it's going to audit. I've actually created a brand new Windows image. I've asked Device Locker to catalog the entire Windows image that I consider as my clean, golden PC. Now you need to do that. You need to say that this PC has everything allowable by the organization. Of course, you can also add applications later. You can remove applications later. But for this particular demo, it's a brand new installation. Without that VLC, I've actually done the audit, and I say, device guard, code integrity protection, please protect this laptop only with these signature or these files. Anything more than that, please don't allow. So if you notice that I ran VLC earlier, since I've already set up, it is running in audit mode. It is not running on enforcement mode, all right? So I'm just going to show you how it looks like in the audit mode. So you can also do something like this. You can actually audit all the files that the user uses, and you can it ends up in the event viewer. So once it ends up in the event viewer, you can actually, there we go, where's that? Code integrity. Once it ends up in the event viewer, you can actually use that information from the event viewer to also whitelist the application or also sign and say this is a secured application. If you notice, it's actually running in audit mode. I can't see. Enterprise signing level requirements or violated code integrity policy. However, due to code integrity auditing policy, so it's in audit mode. I will show you that in the text. In the text, excuse me. It's going to run Notepad, so you can actually see this. Show you that text. All right, enterprise signing level requirements or violated code integrity policy. So anything outside that policy is going to be audited. And why you audit them is for two purposes, obviously, to find out what code is being run outside the allowable code list that you have generated. And you can actually do another thing, that is incorporate those codes that are not authorized into the codes that were authorized. Now I'm going to actually turn Device Guard code signing mode on as enforcement mode. And that will require me to restart the computer, but that's fine. I'll set it up. So the Device Guard enforce policy is actually stored in this folder. So if you want to know more about how this is done and how you actually can take advantage of DeviceGuard code integrity, please check out the MSDN TechNet article, MSDN or TechNet articles. It's actually detailed there, how you can actually do that. So as the name implies, enforce DeviceGuard policy, it is going to start to enforce. So if I go to my administrative template, I think it's system. There we go, DeviceGuard. Whoopee. So the policy is enabled, but it is using a default policy that I was telling you about that only does audit. So what does that mean if it is audit versus not audit? I'm going to set this first. I'm going to show you what does audit versus not audit means. Once you actually audited your PC, you will actually generate a XML file like this. So the policy that you saw earlier was that is currently being enforced is turned on, but it is in audit mode. So I'm just going to show you the initial scan. This is where I generated the original audit mode, and if you can see here, sorry, there's a copy somewhere here. Here we go. If you see here, the rule says audit mode is on. So by default, any scans that you do will turn on audit mode. Now, if I restart this computer, it is going to go into enforcement mode. Let's just try that, and that would probably bring us to the next to the end of the presentation. I need to power up. Okay, so since this computer is running on another machine, I have to restart it from that machine. So just excuse me for a while. I'm just going to use my mouse on the remote side and going to do a power restart. Okay, so once the restart happens, I will reconnect, and we will be able to see the policy being enforced. But meantime, I'm sure you have questions. I'm sure you would want to post some questions, so feel free to do that. And we've come to the end of the presentation with this last demo. We've come to the end of this particular series. But again, this DeviceGuard is something really exciting, and it can potentially really become the silver bullet in protection, in my opinion at least, because if you imagine the way it works, it actually is going to protect software based on its signature rather than whether it has malware, and depend on malware to actually protect or not to protect, anti-malware protection to protect and not to protect. It's a different way of looking at things. Okay, so hopefully the policy is applied, and let me just test this out. It's over Wi-Fi, so it's slow. I'm going to try to run VLC. Oh, what is this? There's an error. Let's look at this. Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to run VLC. I'm supposed to run my code, right? This one here, not VLC. So now that I've enforced, check this out. Yeah, it's not the best message, but at the lower level of the system is blocking that file. Only files that I've audited and authorized are now allowed to run on this Windows 10 machine. So with that, thank you very much for joining us in this Windows 10 webinar series, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thank you. Ooh, we've run out 10 minutes. In case All right, one more thing, just to prove to you that the malware, so-called the one that I wrote, is not running, it's not really running. I'm going to show you the IP address of this guy here. It's this one here. So I'm going to run this software again to try and launch MS Paint, and it's not going to work. Just to be sure, all right? Just to be sure that it's not really some smoke screen. It's the real thing. So Device Guard has completely not allowed the entire application to run. Now we are done. Thank you.